Hello, my name is Dr. Yaya Sissoko. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 6, Supply, Demand, and Government Policy, Control on Prices. So what do we have price control in the economy? The policymaker believe that the market price of a good or service is unfair to buyer or seller. This means that so in a market, buyer will have a market power over the seller, and they can undercut the price of the seller. Or also, seller can have market power over the buyer. They can try to charge seller buyer higher prices. So the government will intervene to try to favor, so one group or buyer or seller or over the other group. But this price control can generate inequities, meaning welfare loss to the society. Also, the government can also impose taxes to raise revenue for public purposes. The government use the tax revenue to fund government programs, build highways, hospital, or classes, for instance. Also, to influence the market outcome in order to favor buyer, over the seller or favor seller of the buyer. There are two types of price control. The first one is called price ceiling. A price ceiling is a legal maximum on the price at which a good can be sold. In the case of price ceiling, the government tries to favor buyer over the seller. For instance, in the case of rent control, the government try to favor the tenant over the landlord so that landlord will not overcharge the tenant. The second type of price control is called price floor. A price floor is a legal minimum on the price at which a good can be sold. Usually, the government imposes a price floor to favor seller over the buyer. One example of price floor is the minimum wage. In the case of minimum wage, the government tries to favor the worker so over the business firm so that the business firm do not hire worker and pay them a wage below the minimum wage. So how do price selling affect the market outcome? So if the price selling is not binding, then it will not affect the market outcome. So for the price selling not to be binding, the price have to be set above the clearing price, in which case the price selling will have no effect on the price or the quantity sold. On the other hand, for the price ceiling to be binding constraint, then it will have an impact on the market outcome, and the price must be set below the equilibrium price. So in which case, it will lead to shortage and seller maturation, the scarce good, which will lead to long line and discrimination according to seller buyers. Figure 1 deal with the market with the price ceiling. Panel A show the price ceiling that is not binding. The government imposed a price ceiling at $4, which is above the equilibrium price of $3. So in that case, the price ceiling does not benefit the buyer because the seller will sell, so the product at the equilibrium price of $3. So on the other hand, panel B, the price ceiling is binding. So you can see the government imposed the price ceiling of $2 below the equivalent price of $3. in which case at the pricing of $2, there'll be a shortage. Buyer want to buy, so 125 cone of ice cream, seller will want to sell only 75 cone of ice cream. There will be a shortage of 50 cone because of the price selling. Another example of a price ceiling is the price ceiling on gasoline, so imposed by the U.S. government. Before 1973, OPEP, raised the price of crude oil, and the equilibrium price was below the price ceiling, and it was not binding, and it has no effect on the market. But when the price of crude oil, rose, this decreased the supply of gasoline. Equilibrium price was above the price ceiling, and the price ceiling was binding, and this led to several shortages. The government had to repeal the law about price ceiling of gasoline. Tricky to deal with the market of gasoline with the price ceiling. In panel A, the price ceiling is not binding. How do you know that the price ceiling is not binding? Because the price ceiling here, price ceiling here, it said at the price which is above P1, the equilibrium price. So because the equilibrium price is at P1, the price is set above the equilibrium price, then it will not affect buyer and seller because it's seller will sell to buyer at the equilibrium price, and they don't need to comply with the price selling. Panel B, the price ceiling on gasoline is binding. How do we know? Because of OPEP impact, the supply curve shifts from S1 to S2, and the new equilibrium is at P2, and which is right here. So which is higher than the price ceiling. In that case, so the price ceiling is binding, and then so because the price ceiling is binding, this is going to lead to a shortage, and how much is the shortage? The shortage will be measured by quantity demanded the by the buyer minus the quantity supplied by the seller. The difference between these two, QD minus QS, equal to the shortage. Another example of the price ceiling is rent control. So local government places the ceiling on rent. The goal is to help the poor, making housing more affordable. But people against the price ceiling say that it's highly inefficient, and it's really an inefficient way to help the poor raise their standard of living. People responded to incentive. With the rent control, this is going to lead to shortages and waiting lists. Landlord lose the incentive to respond to tenant concern. For instance, if the toilet break down, so landlord doesn't have any incentive to come, fix it quickly. So the tenant get lower rent and lower quality housing. So for the government, the policymaker, it's going to be difficult and costly to enforce it. Figure 3 deal with rent control in the short run and in the long run. Let's recall that short run a period less than 1 or 2 years. So and long run a period over 1 or 2 years. Panel A deal with the rent control in the short run and supply and demand are inelastic. So in that case, the rent control here will lead to small shortages. The impact is small on on the buyer and seller. So on the other end, the rent control in the long run, where supply and demand are elastic, then the rent control is going to lead to bigger shortages. So it's going to impact even more the tenant in that case. Figure 4 deal with a market with a price floor. So panel A show the price floor is not binding. How do you know that the price floor is not binding? Because the price floor of $2 is set below the equilibrium price of $3. So therefore, the price floor it's not binding because buyer and seller will will trade at the equivalent price of $3. And Andre unit of ice cream cone will be sold. So in panel B, the price floor is binding. So in that case, the price floor of $4 is set above the equilibrium price, in which case this will lead to a surplus right here. So, and then seller want to sell 120 unit of for ice cream. Buyer want to buy 80, ice cream cone, and then the surplus equal to 120 minus 80, which is equal to 40 ice cream cone will, will be the surplus. One example of price floor is the minimum wage. The minimum wage is above the market equilibrium and it's going to be binding. This will lead, the minimum wage will lead to unemployment, so higher income for worker who have job and lower income for worker with no job because they cannot find work. So the consequence of the minimum wage is going to be unemployment. So so minimum wage usually impact so worker, highly skilled and experienced worker. On the other hand, if the minimum wage is not binding, meaning if it's set below the equilibrium wage, then it has no impact on the market, on the labor market. Figure number 5, show how the minimum wage affect the labor market. So panel A, a free labor market with no minimum wage requirement. So you can see that the labor supply cross labor demand at this point we have the equilibrium wage right here in the equilibrium quantity of labor. Panel B show labor market with a minimum wage which is bounding. With a minimum wage which is bounding, then the minimum wage set above the equilibrium wage which is right here. So this will lead to labor surplus, which is unemployment, because the quantity of labor supplied by worker is greater than the quantity of labor demanded by businesses, so there will be a surplus, which is also unemployment. So evaluating price control, the government can sometimes improve market outcome by using price control because of unfair market outcome. So this policy aim of helping the poor, but sometimes end up hurting them. So there are other ways to help the poor by providing rent subsidy, financial assistance directly to the tenant, we start to give financial assistance directly to the workers.